Today I'm going to show you a few ways that you can make cow face, legs specifically, so much more accessible and more sustainable for your students. Now the reason why this is important is because cow face uses a lot of force to get into the position. Now even those students who you see are in this pose and it looks as though it's incredibly comfortable for them, they don't use any props, everything's flat on the ground, they can forward fold, they can do this, they can do all these things. I almost guarantee you that those people are utilizing great amounts of force to get into it. Now, I'm going to show you, just to appease your curiosity, what I mean when I say great amounts of force and how we can actually measure that. So, if you just get yourself into a basic cow face, whatever that is for you, you can use your props, and just see where your body is at. For me, I can wiggle my legs in there, okay? So you can see the level of my bum is on the same level as my feet. I don't have to raise my bum up to be in this pose, all right? So just remember, feet on the same plane as my bum. However, this is where we can see the force that is used. When I lie down on my back and I try to create the same type of shape without using the floor to force my feet towards my bum and gravity to push my bum down towards the feet, you'll see what I can actually do here. So here I go. That's all that I've got. You can see my feet are not on the same level as my bum. Yeah, I'm raising them a little bit away, but even if I draw them down, I have to actually pull and draw those feet in to get the same position as I had when I'm sitting up. Then when I let go, they let go. So this is a really great example as to how most yoga students, practitioners, whether they're super flexible or not, are utilizing force to create flexibility. Now, why does this actually matter? This matters because I like to refer to the difference between what I could do seated and what I could do hands-free lying down on my back as a blind spot. Now, when there is a blind spot in your practice, that means that there is a higher potential for injury. There's a higher risk for overstretching and generating destabilization in the joints because of how much force is required to make up the difference between not using the hands, right? Or not using gravity or not using the floor, and then going and using the hands as you saw me do. Or sitting down on the floor, gravity pushing me down, and then the floor pushing my feet up to meet my bum and my hips where they are at. So this is a great tool for you to recognize as a teacher if you are invested in helping your students formulate a practice that is more sustainable in approach, it provides more longevity, and it is much more accessible for them as well. So obviously, this might not be the case for everyone. You have students who can't get the bum down with the feet to the side, okay? So they will use a prop. They'll sit up on a prop, a block, or a bolster. However, again, these things are generally acting as filling the gap that the blind spot cannot fill on its own. So even if you see someone who is using a prop and they do need to sit up on something, and then they're able to get those feet and maybe the front knee down, and here they are, right? Even still, they've got, let's say, the height of the block there, the width of the block, they've got that difference. Do the same test. Get them to lay down on their back, no hands, create the cow face shape, measure. What is the difference? I guarantee you that they are not going to be able to get the feet, the block difference. They're going to be even further, okay? So this is a great thing for you to know as a teacher. Again, if you want to help your students create a practice that has more longevity and is more accessible. So I'm going to show you something that you can do in a way that you can approach cow face pose that will help your students access this pose with more ease, find the benefits of hip mobility, not just looking at this through how much can I force my flexibility, and just in general create a pose for them that is so much more advantageous in the long run. Because it's really important that you understand that hip opening, when looked at and approached only through the lens of flexibility, and even further to that, forcing one's flexibility, it is flawed. It is incomplete, and it will not stand the test of time. When we start to look at hip opening through the lens of mobility, that is when we start to get some real great tools for our students and get some really good results for them to be able to create an approach to their practice that can start to stand the test of time and be even more accessible for those students who are finding that, their body just does not want to be forced into things. This is for all kind of levels of practitioner, and especially, as you might not think so, for those ones that are so used to pushing through the blind spots, using force to create flexibility, and really putting themselves at risk of injury. So I want to show you 2 exercises that you can thread into your sequence, one from a tabletop position and one lying down on the back, that will actually help your students prepare for cow face pose. And better yet, it actually acts as an alternative to cow face pose, an alternative variation or a modification, because it provides the same intended target area release and stretch, but without the force, without the risk, and plus with the added benefits of mobility through strengthening the inner thighs. So let's get to it. I'll show you what I mean. So I want to show you from a tabletop position first. One leg will stretch back, the other foot moves to the side, and just like you might normally do, this is perhaps the way that you help your students enter into cow face. However, what we're going to be doing is not sitting the hips down and dropping into flexibility. We're actually going to be utilizing the squeeze of the inner thighs to reciprocally release the outer hips, because that is what this pose is targeting. So there's a few ways that you can do this. So I like to cue to tuck the toes under and then press through the hands, and then option to hover the knees a little bit off of the ground. Now, depending on your students and their knees, they might have their feet out a little wider or might have their feet a little closer together. That's fine. They also do not have to lift the knees off the ground, but it's the action of squeezing between the thighs while pressing down through the hands that creates the inner thigh engagement to help reciprocally release the outer hip. So you can do a few little lifts like that, cueing your students, again, to engage in whatever degree of lift or whatever degree of squeeze between the thighs that is accessible and valuable for them. Now, the second thing that you can get them to do from here, toes untuck, is work to squeeze the feet together and then open the feet apart. Squeeze the feet together and open the feet apart. So again, when we get that squeezing action, it is like an eagle pose because we're utilizing that inner thigh engagement to help release through the outer hip, and then we're just softening that and pressing the toes out to either side. So that little bit of squeeze and release. Now the second way that you can do this is lying down on the back, and just like I showed you before, getting into cow face position on the back. So first we can work on the crossing of the thighs, and then we can work on external rotation. So this is going to be very similar to what we did just in that tabletop position. So you can work on squeezing the feet towards each other, and then in this instance, because we don't have the knees on the floor, we can actually press, and we can cue our students to send the feet to either side and squeeze even more into the inner thighs. And then we can draw the feet together to release it, and then squeeze and press. Now further to this, you can also allow your students to draw the heels down towards the outside of the legs, and then bring the feet out. Draw the heels down, bring the feet out. So here we've got that same activation of the inner thighs, which is naturally releasing the opposing area of the body, the outer hips here. Squeeze down and press out. Now your students' feet might be a little bit more like this. Maybe that's the degree of their external rotation, and that is fine. So long as they are intending to keep those thighs wrapped open as they squeeze down and bring it up, they're going to be getting the same action happening, inner thigh activation, which will will result in outer hip release. And finally, you can just work to have your students kind of press and pulse those thighs against one another, squeezing one leg in front and the other leg behind. You could even swap it. So you've got one leg in front, squeeze, open, and swap. Opposite leg in front, squeeze, open, and swap. Now from there, you can obviously cue them to then go into that reclined cow face, where maybe they are grabbing and they are pulling. But remember, the force and the pulling is actually not necessary to create the actual tangible release, the factual release. It is simply generating more sensations, but sensation doesn't equal benefit, right? So it's really important that the biomechanics are utilized, which is inner thigh activation automatically equals outer hip release, because your body is smart, and this is something you can share with your students. We do not have to pull and shove it into place. That is just for some type of sensation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's equaling the same amount of release. So just that squeeze across is going to be really great. And any of these exercises that I showed you that you put into your sequence can be utilized in place of cow face pose, either seated or reclined. And you can just cue your students to work on the mobility aspect of it, because the forced flexibility, as I said, it does not always end up being super positive or being something that can be maintained in the long run. Using force to create flexibility has a very short lifespan. It has a short shelf life, and it will expire sooner than using mobility to create natural release. So give these a try in your class, in your next sequence. If you liked this video, please make sure you let me know in the comments, like the video, and subscribe if you're looking for more content like this for your teaching.